All right, well, Radd, it is a pleasure to be here, my friend.
It's good to have you here, Jimmy. Thanks.
This is a podcast of exceptional people, and I gotta say, from the very first time we met, it's just fun. Every single time I see you, I literally think to myself, that is a guy that probably would have been my lifelong best friend if we'd have gone to high school together.
Yeah.
You're always doing fun stuff, always smiling and bringing
nice.
value.
Thanks, man. Aren't we now lifelong?
I think we are.
I think we are.
From here on out. Yeah. You have such a unique. You work alongside so many different groups and charities. I came here about a year ago. I came to your house,
right?
And you work a lot with the Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
And do a lot of things. What exactly? Because we'll jump into kind of your business background, some really fascinating things there. But what exactly got you into the Olympic movement with the US Olympic team?
I think, like a lot of people in Utah, I grew up. I was always fascinated with the Olympic athletes, the Winter Olympic athletes, and then in 2012, I bought kind of a struggling MRI facility in South Jordan, and one of the things when I bought it was that we just can't be the same as everybody else, and certainly can't compete with the hospitals. So we rebranded it and changed it to the name of it to US MRI. And then I came up with the term that we marketed was diagnostic sports imaging. So with that, I went up to the US ski team guys. I had been a donor. I knew some of them. But I went to their medical director, a great friend, Kyle Wilkins, and said, look, I bought this company. How about if we enter into an agreement that we will provide the diagnostic imaging, MRIs and x-rays and digital imaging for all your athletes at no cost, but they'll have to come down to Salt Lake City. And in return, we had to enter in a contract where it was legal and clear and defining what we were doing. So that kind of started it. And then it was so much fun working with those kids, getting to know them, getting to know their parents. And one thing kind of led to the other when we had one of the personal physicians of a ski team member, a very well-known ski team member, was also a personal physician for an NHL star. I mean, a huge NHL star. Because of HIPAA, we can't really talk about it. But he suffered a concussion. We were doing some pretty unique concussion protocol MRIs to help diagnose the severity and if it was recoverable and the different approaches we could take. So this gentleman flew in with his agent and his personal physician late at night, all clandestine kind of, and came in the back door, and we were able to really accurately diagnose his condition. I had a great medical director, Ted Kyle, and other physicians on the team. So it was that kind of turned the tables a little bit, because that personal physician referred us to an NFL athlete, a huge name, and then it just kind of started happening. So we had NHL, NFL, NBA, and a ton of UFC fighters come through.
Well, it's kind of the unique timing, your company working with MRIs and concussions, all these things, what's going on right now.
Yeah, that was a tough one. It was just before the concussion lawsuits began to come out with the NFL, and thank goodness. I mean, all the changes that have come about from, really does start young. I know that when I was a kid and playing football and high school football, we led with our head, and we tackled and we ran, and that, if you got a dinger, you just got a dinger, and smelling salts, and you were back in. I'm thrilled that they're teaching different ways to play the game, to tackle, to run, because it's just, we've learned, we learned this really quickly through the aerialists, the Olympic aerialists. When they would over-rotate their jumps and land on the back of their skis, it would just hyper-propel them right to the snow, and even with a helmet, and just jack the back of their head. And it's not that first concussion that does all the damage. It's the concussion following the first when you haven't healed. Think of it as a big thigh bruise, a big hip pointer thigh bruise. And until that's completely healed, if you were to get hit there again, it's going to do a lot of damage. And that's what happens with our brain.
Wow, that's interesting. I never have thought about that. It means it's time to heal. Then it's okay if it happens. I mean, not okay, but it's not as bad as long as you've healed from the previous injury.
The really devastating injuries, and in fact some of the deaths that have occurred, have been kids that were injured, or pro athletes, whatever it may be. Then they went back to the field of play too quickly and then got hit again. that's when the real bad injuries take place, and it's so sad. But I think the NFL is doing the best that they can.
Yeah.
I know they put a lot of resources into combating that in the way that we play, and the game has changed forever.
I got a couple of years back, about 10 years ago, I got a really bad concussion. I was volunteering with the Little Brother, Big Brother, Big Sister program.
Yeah.
And it was my first time ever taking the kid out. We were going sledding. And all I remembered was buying some food at the gas station before. And then I woke up and I'm sitting in my driver's seat. The kid's like 9 years old, right?
Oh my gosh.
And he's standing outside my window just staring at me. My head's like bleeding. I'm like, what is going on? I couldn't remember anything. And so I rolled on the window. I mean, I barely knew who he was because
to begin with.
Picked him up an hour ago. And I'm like, how long you been standing there, man? And he's like, couple hours. And
oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. And I was like, what happened? He goes, you went off a big jump and hit your head. And I was like, wow. And so it was kind of funny. I'd won an award through my real estate thingy a couple of days earlier, and it was in my back seat. And what's funny is I called my brother, and I was like, hey, I need you to come get me. I think I got a concussion or something. And I guess I called him like 3 times. I'm like, hey, man, I hope you're not busy. Like, I think I have, and he's like, I better hurry and get there, you know. And then he said when he picked me up, we were driving, and I guess I was just fiddling through the back seat, and I found this award. He said I got so excited. He's like, dude. And I mean, I had a full ceremony 3 days earlier. He goes, I said, I think I won Realtor of the Year.
You know, it's that Groundhog Day effect where you're, hey, can you come get me?
Yeah.
Hey, can you come get me? That's, the brain is an amazing part of our body that just we take for granted. I know I do. I've had similar experiences. And, so I guess now that we have the awareness, parents and friends and family and probably even 9-year-olds at this point now, it's a serious injury.
Yeah. Well, let's back up because that's kind of been your business career, a lot of medical different things that you've done. But how did you get started and get to where you are today, where you get to work on all these charity boards and volunteer your time and money and effort and things like that?
So I got a really lucky break. It wasn't that I excelled at any one thing. I knew in high school I loved medicine. I loved healthcare, and particularly sports medicine. I didn't have the financial resources, or frankly, to be very honest, the desire to go to the University of Utah, or any university for that matter, and go into medicine. It wasn't in me. But I knew a gal in high school who was a good friend. Her father was what we call a distributor for a company called Zimmer. It's a $1 billion pharma / medical device company. And I worked on the medical device side, where we sold total hip replacement, total knee replacements, trauma, sports medicine. So it fit perfectly to what I wanted to do. And at that time, he said, look, kid, I'll give you a shot. I think I was 23, 24. And if I throw you out there and you swim and you survive, you can have your job. If not, tough. So that was kind of baptism by fire, and that's how I got a shot. I started in Salt Lake City and ended up working in Idaho, and then eventually relocating to Las Vegas, selling mainly total hip replacement, total knee, and sports medicine and trauma. But at those days, and I think it's still true to some degree, we were in every single surgery the physician did. Mm-hmm. So we had a ton of training we had to do to be allowed to be in the operating room and then be able to help these guys do the surgeries.
And so from there, how did you pivot into starting your own company?
Once we had been in Las Vegas, I think about 4 years, got a little burned out. Vegas is a crazy trauma center, as you can imagine, and had some experiences that were, I had little kids at the time, and we had a patient that we were working on, just a tibial fracture or something, and another patient came in, and it was a trauma one, helicopter, life flight, little boy, exact same age as my daughter, that died next to us. And I had seen other patients dying in a trauma center. It's pretty wide open. And, I was just there taking care of this guy's tibia, and it just affected me. It really rattled me, and the father came in and with the highway patrol. It was just a very difficult experience, and it was tough. And I just decided I wanted to take some time away. I just worked too much. So a friend of mine, fellow real estate guy named Mark Harrelson, invited me to come to work back to Salt Lake City for his company. He had a huge marketing firm at the time. And we threw around some ideas, and he had heard of a couple things, said, can you combine this with that? And this is at the time before the internet.
This is what year is all this going in?
Oh my gosh, Jimmy.
Early 90s?
Yeah, early 90s.
Okay.
92, 93.
Okay.
And this tells you my intellect. The internet may have been booming. I didn't know it was booming. But we started a company where we were sending out, I think we got to them about 300,000 faxes a night. And we would go into companies and buy their overstock merchandise or their just materials that they had left over, goods and services, mainly sports and computers and housewares. I mean, you name it. If we could buy it at 80, 90% off, then we turn around to sell it, with a little bit of margin. And that company was called Homespan. And the chairman of the board of my friend's company, and they had many divisions, he and I didn't really see eye to eye on how to run the business. And he wanted to take it one direction, I wanted to go another. And long story short, I lost. This is one of the great smiling failures of my life. But he ultimately ended up turning that company into what's now called Overstock.com. So I've had friends or other people say, yeah, Radd invented Overstock.com. It's like, no, I invented a fax machine company that did about 20, 25 million, which is great revenues. But I had nothing to do with the ultimate creation of Overstock.com, but I certainly created the seed of Overstock.com.
Yeah, I mean, the concept and the seed of
yeah.
what you guys were doing, you were buying the whole name Overstock.com.
That's exactly
what you were doing.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so once you ended up not being a part of that anymore, I mean, was that difficult to watch as it succeeded and became Overstock.com?
Not really. I never felt, I never, even to this day, felt like, oh man, I missed the boat. The reality is I knew I didn't have the skill set to take it to that level. I went, after that ended, I just went right back into healthcare, and things had advanced, and I kind of wanted to stay focused on an area, and it was spinal implants. So I started a company in 2004 called Bywater Surgical, and we were a spinal implant distribution company. And same kind of a model as I was in before, but instead of being the sales rep, I was now the distributor and the owner of the company, and that really grew and took off.
Why did you decide to go into that particular? It's such a specialized thing. Why go into that specific thing?
Spine is specialized, and it's difficult, and it's intense, very rewarding, and the economies were a lot better at that time. Total hips and total knees were taking a huge beating in reimbursements. And I just thought, gosh, if I'm going to spend the same amount of time in a surgery or building a company, I want to at least get reimbursed. So spine was growing, and the reimbursements were still healthy, so that's the way I went.
That's amazing. And so what did you grow that company into over the next?
Oh gosh, I grew it. I think we had probably a 12-fold in revenues. From a guy had it, the distributorship, before I got here, and he was not really knocking it out of the park. So I got a chance, and we had about a 12-fold increase in revenue and sales. And then, as is fairly common in that industry, the manufacturer of the implants, and we had this in a contract agreement up front, they bought me out. So in 2010, they bought my distributorship back. It's not unlike an automotive dealership where General Motors would come back in and buy out not Larry Miller, but something like that. And I had, at that time that I had the implant company, I also had grown and bought the MRI facility, and I had bought another surgical diagnostic surgical tooling company. And it just as kind of happened, I didn't plan really on selling any of those. But I got another offer to sell it's called intraoperative neurological monitoring. 2 years after I bought that company, and I think we had like a 50-fold growth, sold that company. So within about a year, I was somewhat unemployed. I had sold my two companies, and fortunately I bought the MRI facility.
Well, and so how did you decide at that point? I mean, you'd had all this success. You'd been able to sell two very successful companies. How did you decide what you were going to do with the rest of your time in your life?
I really thought I would dedicate, most of my time to the diagnostic imaging. I thought that there was potential to build other locations, but I had, not unlike your concussion, I had what's called a subarachnoid hemorrhage, and I had a quadruple one. Again, not unlike you, I was at home with my son, had this, what they call a thunderclap headache. This was in December of 2013. And next thing I knew, I woke up, I knew we went to St. Mark's Hospital. I woke up at the University of Utah a couple days later. And basically, I had 3 or 4 different locations in my brain that just all of a sudden burst. So it's kind of like an aneurysm, but instead of a burst, it's a bleed. So I was there for almost 4 weeks in the neurocritical care unit, and not all of my faculties were working. My speech was messed up. My gait, my walk was messed up. And they told me it would take a long time to recover, and it did. It took about a year till I was really up and going again. And during that time, it wasn't this great, beautiful epiphany. It was that once my brain had healed and I was back to work, I just realized I didn't want to keep cranking the 16, 18, 20-hour days. And what went with those days was the stress, the level of stress. So I loved what I was doing, but I knew something had vanished. And what vanished was maybe that, not the drive, but the insatiable drive to gotta build. It just, all of a sudden, I looked around at my children, my family. I didn't have that same motivation. So I had a group of physicians and a private equity group kind of band together and come, and they knew my situation, and my medical director was very involved, and they made an offer to buy me out. And so in February 2014, I sold that company, and it was a lot of fun, and it was emotional. It was a tough sell, but it was a very successful exit for me. And I think about a month later, Tim Mallard invited me to go and observe some activities, some work they were doing in Haiti with Operation Underground Railroad. So that's how I got involved.
Yeah, so you jumped in with Operation Underground Railroad, which is coincidentally how you and I met.
That's right.
Me and you met on and op.
Uh-huh.
And that was back when OUR was doing more one-off ops, trying to get their name, trying to get, really get it going and just see if this actually would work.
Yeah, and I think like any business, you have a plan, and as that business matures and grows, you have to adapt to what's happening. So yeah, we did meet on and off, and you love to tell people the first time we met, we got arrested together. It's not quite as sordid as that sounds.
My favorite thing about you is how you would dress. The first time I ever met you and saw you, I'm like, I don't even know who that guy is. But you had like this Italian suit and hat on.
Yeah, that I put a hole in that Italian suit when we got thrown to the ground. And that was the director of operations for OUR said we need an El Jefe. And I had been with Tim observing different missions and stings, and so Matt Osborne asked me if I could play the role of El Jefe, and we've got all our undercover guys that have been down there, and we just need you to come in and play this role. And I was like, great, terrific. So yeah, I did wear a suit. Yeah, I did. I still have pictures of us from that.
I loved it.
But that's how I got really, I had done some work. I had been traveling with Tim Mallard quite a bit, and so I was involved in OUR and continue to be involved with them. I'm no longer employed by them, but I still support them and do what I can with Tim.
Well, you guys have started, you and Tim have kind of started a branched off business.
Well,
tell us a little bit about that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's not really a branch of OUR, although there's some similarities. I need to make very clear that the company we've started is called B3 Development Initiatives, and it's an international development company. It is a for-profit. And it does work in that somewhat of the same arena. We are a countering violent extremism and anti-human trafficking organization. And the gist of it is, if any entity receives funding from the federal government, and right now the minimum is if you receive $500,000 from the federal government, which is an enormous universe of entities, you have to be compliant in anti-human trafficking. And which I applaud. I think it's great. But there's thousands and thousands of companies that need that training. How do we get trained? How do we get compliant? How do we get certified? So Tim Mallard and I and a gentleman named Brad Baxter, with the help of a friend of ours, Dave Lopez, who you know from OUR, have started this company. We go in and we do the training. We have risk assessment tools. So depending on where that organization is, they could be, they could be building a dam in somewhere in Mosul. If one of their employees that is part of this firm has taken steps that would involve them in human trafficking, and probably, frankly, the most common is prostitution. So one of those contractors goes and takes a prostitute to a hotel, and it's found out that he did this. And there's a likelihood, given wherever in the world that this is occurring, that that prostitute was likely involved in some form of human trafficking. Not always, but sometimes. The federal government will now shut off their funding if that occurs and they find out. If they've been trained and certified, then they'll just open an investigation. Now what happens after that, I don't know. So our company goes in and we do the training and certification in the anti-human trafficking. The other component is that there's estimates that as high as 40% of the terrorist dollars are used for terrorism are now coming from human trafficking, whether that's in sex slavery, child labor, organ harvesting, or just any type of human trafficking. So that illicit enterprise is as you know, it's $100 billion plus enterprise that is growing faster than anything else because they've learned what it's so profitable.
Well, the thing that's so profitable about human trafficking, whether it's sex or labor or whatever else, is like if somebody's a drug dealer, they sell the product, they got to make more product. With human trafficking, they don't. They just keep using the same person over and over.
Exactly, especially on that sex slavery side and the child sex slavery. These poor people, these poor kids, as you know, Jimmy, they'll be raped 30, 40, 50 times, sometimes more in a day. And the pimp or the traffickers, you don't have to you don't give them a little food, a little bit of water, and oftentimes these kids live honestly in kennels behind hidden walls. So it's horrific and extremely profitable.
Well, what a great business, though, that you get to go in and educate them, these businesses that need this training.
Right.
And is there anything, there was probably nothing like that out there.
There hasn't been. There's a lot of, as we used to call them, and I don't mean it derogatory, but they're banner wavers that have really raised awareness in human trafficking. But candidly, there is no organization, there's no company in the world as uniquely qualified to teach anti-human trafficking as we are. Given our background, Tim's 13, 14 years working undercover for the federal government and Homeland Security, and so his brains behind us, and our other partner, Brad Baxter, who's worked for the last 15 years mainly in conflict zones, all over Syria, or Iraq, Turkey, all over the biggest hotspots in the world, where they've gone in after terrorist activities to reestablish governance and civil services. So you combine those tools together and hopefully with a little bit of business acumen that I'll bring to the table, I think we're going to be quite successful. There's a component to it I really want to share with you. I think it's going to actually be
please.
One of our biggest portions of it. We invented or developed something called the 1% Alliance. And the 1% Alliance is a commitment that we're getting with the organizations globally that we will train, whether it's, and I'm throwing these, Boeing or Microsoft or Marriott or whatever it may be, that they will agree to employ 1% of their workforce of human trafficking survivors.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool. And then what we did is, that's terrific, you can make that connection. We've partnered with a company called Allison.com. Allison has over 12 million students worldwide now, and it is a free online training portal, the platform with, I think now there's a little over 400 different curriculums that people can take for free. And then that way we can pull these survivors out, work with organizations that treat and help rehabilitate the healthcare and recovery side. And then once they're ready to go back in, and that's a long time, that could be 6 months, it could be 2 years, it could be longer, but when they're ready, then we put them through the training. You can pick anything you want, from art to photography to language skills, coding from Microsoft, whatever it may be. They get trained, and then we have a funnel of jobs with these groups in the 1% Alliance that agree to hire.
Wow, that's amazing. And I love that because, I kind of had heard about this was coming up because people ask me all the time, what's the rehabilitation or what's the process once you actually do these rescues? And there's so much that OUR and Tim and you and everyone has put into place to really create a life, not just of survival, but where they have the opportunity to thrive later.
It's been neat to see. I mean, that was always, Tim was so acutely aware of the importance of recovery. It doesn't do us any good to liberate children and then have them just back in the family that sold them potentially, or to the pimps or traffickers. So Jessica Mass and the recovery team at OUR has done just an amazing job. It's been fun to watch, taking a step back, the genesis of OUR from rescues, and then the implementation of recovery, and Jenny working on the prosecutorial side, so that they cover all the, they find them, they help recover the kids, and then they bust those people that effectuate these horrors on these children.
Yeah, no, it's such a cool. Well, one of the coolest things for me of being a part of OUR and being able to go on some of these ops is the caliber of people that jump on board to be a part of this. I mean, meeting somebody like you, I mean, we've become close friends.
Very friends.
People like Tim and Paul Hutchison and Andrew McCubbins and Matt Osborne, all these different people that just everybody supporting a great cause. It's one of the, I think it's the only thing I've ever found where whether you're Republican or Democrat, black or white, none of it matters. Everybody's pretty much, unless you are a pedophile, everybody's pretty much on board that this is a great cause to get.
Yeah, it really is, and it was fun to see. In fact, whether you're Republican or Democrat or whatever you may be, I had the opportunity through Tim to go to the Pittsburgh Steelers training camp last week, and as you know, Coach Tomlin is a huge supporter of Tim and OUR, and in fact wrote the foreword to Tim's new book called Slave Stealers, which I think is being released in the next week or so.
Yeah.
Great, amazing book. I loved it. I was able to read advanced copy. But as I was listening to Coach Tomlin talk to his players as he was introducing Tim Mallard and Dave Lopez, his point was, look, there's enough division in this country. And whether you're white, black, yellow, brown, it doesn't matter. And whether you're Republican or Independent or Democrat, it doesn't matter. And whether you kneel or stand during the national anthem, it doesn't matter. What matters is finding something that can bring us all together. And he has wholeheartedly endorsed Tim and his team and John Lyons and OUR, and this is what we can do to bring people together. It crosses every boundary, it crosses every stigma that may be out there, and it was so cool to see these behemoth men watch the most recent documentary, Operation Tucson. It was hard to see if there was not a single guy in there that wasn't crying. And then afterwards, coming up and grabbing us and asking us questions and how can I help? And the big names, the Ben Roethlisberger, the Juju Smith-Schuster, AB, all these amazing athletes coming in and saying, we're in, what can we do, how can we help?
Yeah, well, and that's kind of where it's evolved too, is the awareness factor and everything else. But you've been such a big part of that from the beginning, from special advisor to now working with this other company. So I guess now that we've kind of covered your history, I think people are getting an idea that you were an expert at taking a company, building it, and having a successful exit as well. What advice do you give to young entrepreneurs? People, so many times people have these ideas, they want to start a business. I mean, you just went for it. You kept creating these things, exit after exit. So I want to see first what advice you have for them, and then talk about maybe what you did when you think you were going.
I think that I learned a little bit through just experience. I didn't have any one playbook I used. But I think as I look back, what did I do? I would run the company from a financial standpoint and otherwise. I'd always try and run it as if it were a publicly traded company. So my financials were in order, my policies and procedures, all of those things were in order. And I may not have seen the value of it at the time, but I ran it with that mentality, and that's what enabled me to have a successful exit. Because if you're running a business, and your books and numbers and business plans and forecasts and all those things you need to do, you have to do. If they aren't in line, the value of that company will come down as exponentially as it can go up if those things are in order. So I would get that historical data. What did we do in January of 2012 versus January of 2013 versus January of 2014? So when you can measure out that historical data, that adds value. And then you can begin to forecast, okay, I need this for growth, I need this for overhead, I need this for salaries. You got to pay attention. How much is healthcare costs going to go up? Because I paid that for my staff. So doing those things, run it like a public company. enjoy the benefits of a private company, and the exits will come. And I never ever have started a company with the intent of, I'm going to sell this, but it just kind of happened.
That's such great advice, because it is so true. If you don't have your numbers in order, if you can't read all the numbers and everything, there's no value in them buying it, because there's no predictability to the business. But what a great, and it's a piece of advice I don't think anybody's shared yet on the show, but that is such a great, in real estate it's really hard for me. I'm not a numbers guy naturally.
Yeah.
And my first 4 years in the business, I never even kept books for accounting. I just would, like, at the end of the year, I'd give it all to my accountant and I'd pay taxes. Yeah. But it was funny, because I'd been doing real estate 3-4 years and I didn't have any money, and I'd been making a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I was like, where the hell's all my money going, And so I kind of finally started realizing, okay, I need to, like, really buckle this in and figure out my numbers. And then, like, now my business, I tracked for years and years. I tracked every number, every dollar, and everything became predictable.
Yeah.
And honestly, what it did for me was it alleviated a lot of stress.
It does.
Because especially as a real estate agent, there's that unpredictability of, like, when's my next sale coming? But it got to a point where I actually could predict my numbers and my growth, and it's been pretty accurate based on past performance. If I make X amount of calls, I know I can trace it back to how much per call I end up making.
Absolutely.
As an agent.
Yeah, I would break it down just like that. I would, at the MRI facility, I'd break it down to exactly how much we spent on an MRI, electricity, overhead, physician time, and how much money we made on an MRI or an X-ray. And part of what people don't talk about, it's really kind of fun once you start to do those forecasts and those projections to see, oh, yeah, I was on that. Man, there's historical data, and it's true, and it's trending. And then you interviewed Brad Jensen from Key Nutrition. He's one of my dearest friends. I love that kid. As he was launching his company, which has been hugely successful, it's been great to watch that growth.
So exciting.
We would talk about things like this, and I would kind of, I don't know if I was a mentor to him, but we'd have a lot of late night conversations. How's this? How's that? And I'd remind him, Brad, if you take, and you don't have to starve. You don't have to live like a pauper while you're building a successful company. But if you pull out $100,000 now to go buy a car or house, whatever it may be, you're leaving about $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 on the table, because when you use that cash, if you pull it out now, it's worth $100,000. Leaving it in the company and growing it, your exit based on an EBITDA or any other kind of valuation, it's going to be likely to be 5 to 6 to 7 times what it was worth. So I always say, leave the cash in the company, build it, grow it. You'll get that valuation back manyfold when you exit.
That's great. He actually does. Brad's a close friend of mine as well, and he calls you a mentor for sure.
That's nice.
Gives you a lot of credit for helping him. It has been really fun to watch as he's succeeded with that, and honestly, it's helped me stay in shape. Over the last few years.
I need to follow more of his advice on that.
I think we all do. I think it was funny, because I was helping him sell a house recently, and the deal fell apart one day, but my admin, or the guy that works with me, had been going to see Brad, and he put on like 15 pounds on a cruise. And I called, Brad found out, and I called him about the house deal that fell apart, and he could have cared less, but he was so mad that Chris had put on 15 pounds. That was what he was upset about.
He holds your feet to the fire. You have that accountability.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing too, certainly in business, as you know. And whether it was business or OUR or marriage or I'm huge into accountability. If you mess up, that's my bad. That is, it will only get worse if you try to bullshit your way out of it. It never works. Yeah. The biggest hits I've taken in my life, thank goodness, I've said, yep, that was me. I did that, and I'll try to make it right. What can I do to fix this, and learn from that experience?
No, I think it's a great lesson. Well, another question I wanted to ask you, because one of the things that I respect about you is your ability to keep. It seems like you just have a passion for everything in your life, for your business. The way you light up talking about numbers made me laugh just now. You have a very passionate relationship with your wife. You guys are always, seem like you're doing amazing. And so, what is it that you do? Do you have daily routines or any kind of daily, just something ritual that you do every day to keep this passion and keep your life going the way you want?
Yeah, I think, and thanks for noticing that. I have an amazing wife who I met through OUR, Joanna. We have amazing, terrific kids. I think it's, sometimes you see these interviews or podcasts, and was there a book or anything you read? It's funny that, and I think you've interviewed both our friend Sean Whalen. I love Sean Whalen. I love it how real and raw and straightforward. You get behind the face of Sean Whalen. This kid is smart. He is one of the most well-read, versed guys I've ever sat down with. And the things that I was doing in my life, if I look back professionally and personally, and this is another plug for a book, he wrote a book called How to Make Shit Happen. And I bought 10 copies and I gave it out to my son, I gave it to my business partner. That book is really not unlike what I do every day. I may not have the get up at 5 a.m. and work out for 2 hours like he does, or like perhaps I used to, but the things that he talks about in that book really are coming down to plan your day. Know that you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and you're going to accomplish this. That helps me feel accomplished. When I feel accomplished, I'm happy. When I'm happy, I'm excited and motivated and smile. But trust me, brother, there are times when I don't do that. I'm just like everybody else. I guarantee you have these days where you're just like, "Fall. This sucks. I'm tired. I don't have energy. I don't want to do this. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to, do all these things." When you plow through it and you take a step back and take a look at it, we're all cyclical. We're all going to have better highs than lows, and hopefully those highs will outnumber the lows. And my experience is if you get in rhythms and do things productive and eliminate the drama wherever possible, drama's going to be there for everybody. But if you can head it off up front and get that shit out of your life, it makes for a much better climb, a happier climb. And then, my wife and I'm as excited to see her today as I was the day we met. And it's only been 3 years. Will it kick? Yeah, I think it will maintain that way, because she apparently feels the same way about me. So that's my advice.
No, it's great advice. And I actually 3 weeks ago, me and Sean flew up to Canada. We went to the Calgary.
Yeah, I saw that. That was cool.
And no, it is true though. Like, it's one of those things where something that I love about Sean is the authenticity.
Oh yeah.
And really not having an expectation. Me and Sean talk about this all the time. Not trying to live up to somebody else's expectations of what your life needs to look like. When you truly get around the idea of like, this is my life. I have no expectation from others or anybody or even myself what it has to be, but obviously you're building it by design, but you let it just be, then there really is no self-inflicted pain on your life.
Yeah. Sean's, genius at that, and it's been fun to watch him grow and his celebrity, his rise as a person and the work that he does. But it's like, don't live up to anybody else's expectation. What is your expectation? Right. And that's difficult for people to find. What is my expectation of myself? I have a pretty good one, but it varies from time to time. Yeah, I love Sean. I couldn't be happier for his success.
Yeah, well, I think there's so many good pearls out of this entire thing, and man, I sure appreciate you and your mentorship and friendship.
And it's good to
look forward to many more good times.
Absolutely. Thank you, friend.
Thanks, Radd.